mainly about tomorrow. And yeah, it's quite a tricky task to predict the future. So we need to rely our projections into assumptions of different levels of technology development, current tendencies in the market, policies that frame the environment that we are considering. And further we look into the future, more uncertain are our assumptions. So we rely on institutions that are doing that as a job, for example, the International Energy Agency, to understand how they see those projections into the market, and also to understand how the other technologies that we might compete with are expected to evolve through time. So we can also understand how our pace are related to them. And as on the right side of the graph, the red numbers, or the red part of the chart, sorry, oh, the green part of the chart highlights how much of bio drop-in is expected as of 2030 for the different transport modes. Of course, the different transport modes will require different specifications, and also will have different ways of getting that into the market. And we address that as well during the project proposition. As we discussed it before, every new characteristics of the fuel will impact on different designing on the process. So it's important to have that in mind when we are designing the process. One of the aspects that will shape the future projections of market is the legislation. Of course, that if we are proposing a renewable fuel, it's not cost as effective as fossil-based counterpart. Is expected to be such like that. It's a very mature industry with more than 100 years. Would be rational to think that we can come up with a renewable fuel that is cheaper than fossil. So we need to rely on incentives and legal framework that can make a friendly environment for this technology deployment and also for fuel uptake. On the technology part, Link will address more properly for further on. So I'll try to focus on what does that mean for the fuel uptake. We have several frameworks that will safeguard some volumes for biofuels. So that's a way to decrease the risks of investment, but also to foster the technology development. On a European level, I'd like to highlight the EU Green Deal, European Green Deal. So it's a very ambitious target for decarbonizing the transport sector that aims to integrate aviation, maritime, and road transportation into the trade system, carbon trade system in Europe. And how does that look like is still quite uncertain, even though we have some figures, is not well defined so far, but it's going to be crucial to benefit the technology for a more cost-effective solution. And the proposition of the red tree. So the red tree is expected to address a lot on the cascading effect of use of residues, but also the waste hierarchy. And from the NextGen perspective, which is very good because we are handling feedstocks that are hard or nasty to use. So usually we dispose that. So it's good that we can handle that into a more value-added product. And also that we came with recycling and possibility of having byproducts, all this scope with the NextGen proposition in relation to what is expected from the red tree. And finally, it's not only legal frameworks, not only market, but also practicalities on the use of the fuel. So a few that might address those remarks here are more expected to have an easier uptake in the market. So how a new proposition will relate not only for the hardware, but also for the software that we have nowadays. And what is nice about this part of the project that we could do that 2 years ago and also now, so we could see how those things are evolving. And even though we identify that fuel compatibility, storage, refueling, and energy density of the fuels are, of course, pricing as well, but we have a dedicated section for pricing. I'm not going to go to that direction. But even though we have those points highlighted as blocking or things that will affect how easy a fuel might come, we can see that different propositions are being addressed in order to overcome them. For example, we have bio and renewable parks so that we can bring together inputs and expertise As such, we can bring a favorable environment so the unit can benefit from the environment that is inserted. So the green corridors, in order to bring low energy fuels into a viability and liability scale, and to take use of existing value chains. That's what we are trying to do here. We are trying to benefit from the scales of residual waste management and on. However, this is pretty much focused on the fuel part. Now I'll give the floor for Ling. She will elaborate on the technology part, but also by the end, she will highlight on a nutshell everything that we have addressed together.
Thank you. Sorry about the formatting. So I will just talk through it. Stakeholder mapping is one of the most important part for the project, that we get firsthand information from key stakeholders like wastewater treatment plants and municipalities, as well as oil off-takers. So we found out that it could be limited to get sewage sludge from wastewater treatment plants, especially in the Netherlands and Germany, because more than half of the sludge are sent to mono incineration plants right now. But they do have some opportunities for HTL technology. For example, in the Netherlands, there are 21 water boards, and most of the, all of them have some target to be energy neutral by 2030 and circular by 2050. In Germany, there is a mandate to recover phosphorus by 2029. So these are the opportunities we can see for HTL. And for the bio-waste, there is a EU Waste Framework Directive mandates that require all the EU countries to collect bio-waste separately, which gives more, we think it's more positive thing regarding collecting bio-waste for HTL. And in Sweden, we think there is no focus on the mono incineration for sewage sludge. Mostly they're still land application, but there's also no policy certainty to support any new technology. So there's a wait and see kind of a situation in Sweden. That makes us think, you know, for HTL plant, we should design or consider of aggregating both sewage sludge and the bio waste for make sure the feedstock supply is secured. And for oil refineries, we know that they have obligations to meet the national blending mandates, and we see a rapid growth of the interest to get low CI renewable diesel. And when we talk to them, they the price tolerance for them to take renewable biofuels is not exceed the non-compliance penalty. However, we have a different thinking of that, because most of the oil refineries probably don't want to be on the list of paying non-compliance penalties. And for marine sectors, they don't have mandates like oil refineries, but we do see a lot of initiatives led by the shipping companies and their clients. They want to be carbon neutral by 2050. They believe that advanced biofuels could be the most effective, cost-effective solutions to achieve their net zero goal. However, they think because biofuels, they think they're competing with road transportation and aviation, so they don't think there's enough biofuels for the shipping industry, and they see it as a short to mid-term solution, and they think when the other alternatives are mature, they will maybe shift to like ammonia and the other technologies. And in Netherlands, in Netherlands, for example, the Port of Rotterdam, they are very interested in green projects. And I will elaborate it more for the next slides because I'm showing the scenario for the Netherlands today. And in Germany, their oil refiners are heavily focused on green hydrogen. And we think the opportunities may exist with oil refiners that don't have that initiatives. And in Sweden, the oil refiners there are more open-minded to co-processing. Although right now the momentum is for HVO produced from tar oil, but there the opportunities is like they could be the first mover for co-processing HTL biocrude. So based on our stakeholder mapping, we have these two infrastructure potential scenarios. One is the standalone scenario, which means we produce biocrude with and upgrade to finished fuels at a single location. And the other is called hub and spoke mode, which means we actually produce HTL biocrude close feedstocks in multiple locations, but aggregate all the biocrude to a central location. It could be a co-processing with oil refinery, or we build a centralized upgrading unit for HTL to produce HTL finished fuels. And most of our interviewees agrees that this hub and spoke mode will be more cost effective and also with less carbon footprint, not transporting all the waste, across the city or across the country. And we have some comments regarding the infrastructure from the marine sector. They think the infrastructure is a key to alternative fuels implementation, and they probably be more important than cost. There was a bad example of liquid natural gas, which there's no well-established infrastructure for the shipping industry right now. And they also prefer to have biofuel supply globally at big bunkering ports, which Port of Rotterdam is one of the biggest ports, bunkering ports. And we have two options for the fuel to go to market. First is to sell HTL biocrude as is or partially upgrade to meet the specs for the marine sector, or send to an oil refinery for co-processing. Another option is to produce HTL finished fuels and then use for the road transportation sector. Probably the biggest opportunity is the heavy-duty trucks. So we have developed 3 scenarios for each country, but we are going to just show you the case for the Netherlands today due to time limitation. And we understand the Netherlands has supportive regulations, and the marine biofuel is also eligible for the HBE scheme. And for example, at Port of Rotterdam, there are total 6 oil refineries in the Netherlands, but 5 out of them are located at Port of Rotterdam. So all the infrastructure is well established there, and it's also one of the biggest bunkering ports to all the shipping companies. And in addition to that, Rotterdam, city of Rotterdam is also aligned with the Port of Rotterdam. So you will get a lot of support from the municipality when you develop a green project like HTL. And talking about the feedstock availability, there are total 21 waterboards in Netherlands. And 2 mono incineration plants are processing the biosolids for like 11 of the waterboards. So there's still some waterboards you can get bio waste for sewage sludge from them. And some of the cities with high population, they are also under pressure of achieving the full capacity of treating their bio waste. So we think a demonstration project with within the Netherlands could be a good start for the next phase, if there's a next phase for NGRF. So based on all that, we think we could have a centralized upgrading facility, or we find a partnership with one of the oil refineries at Port of Rotterdam. And then we built several upgrading or HTL plant in different locations with high population. You will see there are two different icon. This one, the first one, is more like aggregating mainly bio-waste, because those areas are the water boards are vested with mono incineration plants. The other one is half, means like aggregating both sewage sludge and bio-waste in the areas that wastewater treatment plants doesn't have mono incineration plants. So this is the case for the Netherlands. Excuse me. Okay, and we also identify a few barriers. I think Lasse has mentioned. So first of all, I think the stakeholders are we're dealing with will be super conservative. To the water boards, the biggest concern is they want to know if this new technology, when you integrate with their system, is it operating continuously? So they cannot afford any blocking issue or stopped operation, because they are they're dealing with treating all the sewage sludge from the municipality, the cities. And we probably, some of the people here, the Amsterdam is selling the incineration plant, because I think 4 out of 6 incinerator of these AEB are broken. So a lot of waste that they don't have place to go. The concern for oil refinery is also the most biggest concern is if the biofuels, the quality is consistent, and if they will cause any deactivation for catalysts when co-processed with their facility. Another concern is each oil refineries, they have their own settings. So probably there's some challenges when you send your biocrude, HTL biocrude, you need to do some modification to meet their operation conditions. Marine sector, we don't have an international biofuel mandates and incentives, so they're not obligated to do so. But we don't have to wait for it. I think there are some initiatives probably for the EU. They will have some regulations soon available. And the last barriers we think is this EU waste hierarchy, which right now, according to the definition, HTL falls into the recovery category, and it's lower than the recycling, because they think this is an energy recovery technology. However, we know it's not. So HTL produce the products recover phosphorus, and the CO2 we can capture it and use it as for the enhanced oil recovery, or we can produce like a power to fuel project that is also recovery a lot of water for maybe irrigation use. So we think we should find an opportunity to lobby the EU to consider move HTL into a recycling category. So this is the ramp up for my talk. So we think from the feedstock supply perspective, we should think of including more feedstock, more organic waste. It's not only limited to the residential food waste or sewage sludge. We can include commercial food waste and we can include wood waste from construction and even beyond urban organic waste, like maybe farmyard manure and slurry, because we have demonstrated that HTL technology can, process all these problematic feedstocks, and that will make sure the supply of the feedstock, and also make sure the scaling up is available. The feedstock is available for the technologies to scale up to a commercial scale. When we talk about the technology and the scaling up, we think we should address all the identified technical challenges, and we can improve the product quality and the yield. A demo project will be necessary, and have the stakeholders involved at early stage to ease their concerns. And we get more detailed data to improve the TEA or LCA. And then we can think of integrate with other technologies like carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and as I mentioned before. And the last one is we should create a market segmentation. I think we probably focus a lot on the fuel, the HTL fuel product, but I think there's a value to investigate more for the non-fuel biofuel product to understand what's the market value for all these potential products. Probably we can use that to convince how HTL technology could move to a recycling category for the EU waste hierarchy. And all these can be supported by regulatory framework and the funding and the financing and all the environmental impact that HTL can bring to the market. We have to keep marketing or education to the public to get more support from to bring this technology to commercial scale. Thank you. I think. Yeah, that's all from Felipe and I want to take the opportunity to thank everyone and supported this project. And I got a lot of feedback from interviewees that people from Europe never know me, and they talk to me openly, and gives me a lot of good feedback about this project. Thank you.
Thanks, Ling. Before you take a seat, and maybe Felipe, I don't know if anyone has any questions online, or maybe someone has a question for Felipe.
For you? Okay.
So we have a question from Raul Perez Vega. So how would be the acceleration of the market penetration if directive on marine biofuels is approved next year? Its update is that the European Parliament agreed sending to Commission the necessary change last month. Thanks. Raul, if you could give me any more, if any particular point of the directive that you want to be addressed here, but what we know from the marine sector, but is also valid for the other, any transport sector, and to some extension to the energy sector as well. The European Commission is favoring more, or it tends to favor on the CO2 mitigation or the emission mitigation rather than technology focus, but it's still a lot of attention being given to carbon capture and use in terms of fuel, like synthetic fuels and on. I think that what is going to be more important on this regard, not only the European directive, but how the countries will transpose that to national level. So we have some flexibility on that point. Of course, that is capped to a limit. We cannot have, for example, we have 10% of the cap for the Netherlands. It's being discussed that that would be not the case anymore. However, how we as, or the Netherlands will cope with the current market that is already over there. So what I can tell you from this broad question is indeed a lot of attention will be given for synthetic fuels, but we just have a fleet out there that is expected to be sailing for the next 20 years, and we need to cope with their demand. And also IMO will require that the decarbonization fits their plans. It's also expected that next year we have the integration of the marine sector to the carbon trade system, to European carbon trade system. This is something that we expect that might have a major impact on how cost effective the solutions that we provide to market will look like. But still, we will need the biofuel drop-in or any drop-in solution. And today, talking about drop-in, biofuel is still being the most cost-effective solution that we have.
Thanks, Felipe. Does anyone have any other questions in the room or online? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. So I have a question about the overall economics, actually. So you also mentioned the AEB, fuel energy bed drive. There are 4 burners and there are 3 of them broke down. But I also know that they don't have, many times they don't have enough waste to process. So they have to import waste from Italy or from UK. So if you actually look at the magnitude of the biofuels that has to be required by Schiphol, for example, and when we have looked at the organic waste in Amsterdam is never going to be enough. But is there some kind of study how much waste from Netherlands can provide enough biofuel for the requirement of Schiphol? And if that is true, if it is possible to do this, and what would be the cost of producing that biofuel compared to the conventional fuel? Because the conventional jet fuel is not taxed, as we know, and it's very cheap. So how are we going to compete with that?
We have a dedicated session for economics, and I think I will leave that to my colleague Alec to answer. Regarding how if there is enough feedstock, right now, as I mentioned, half of the water boards sending their sewage sludge or the biosolids to mono incineration plants. So that's why we are saying we should consider co-process bio-waste and sewage sludge together. And for the near term or short term, if it's a demonstration plant, we are not thinking of if there is enough sewage sludge, but in a longer term, let's say more than 10 years, the lifespan of the mono incineration plants could be, exceed their lifespan. Then all the water boards probably can use their sewage sludge for HTL process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And
okay, thank you. Is that all from the floor online? Okay, so we'll go over online now because unfortunately Gonzalez wasn't able to join us here in person. Can you hear me, Gonzalo?
Yeah, I can hear you well.
Online?
Can you hear me?
Hey, yes. How are you?
Good. Yeah, I'm fine.
Good.
I'm really sorry I cannot be present physically in Amsterdam.
We understand.
Yeah. Do you want? Should I share my screen, or do you want to run the presentation from there?
What do you feel more comfortable?
Well, I think I will feel more comfortable if I share my screen and I run the presentation.
Okay, go for it. Go.
Yeah. Let me know when you can see my presentation.
It's just loading. Yes, we can see it.
Good.
Okay. Go for
it. Great. A few words about myself. So my name is Gonzalo del Álamo. So I'm working as a research scientist at Sintef Energy Research in Norway. So we have been leading Work Package 5 in NextGenRoadFuels, which is basically addressing the techno-economic analysis and the LCA of the technology pathway that we have been considering in the project. and then the work that I have been doing is on the techno-economic analysis. And then here we have been addressing one of the main questions in the project, which is how much it costs to produce the biofuels based on the technology pathway that we have been considering in the project. So, and this is the topic of my presentation. So this is an outline of what I would like to present. So there will be some highlights on the process design, which is a really important aspect when we want to evaluate the overall economy and the cost of producing biofuels. I will also, based on the process design and the process analysis, I will give some key figures on the mass energy balances of the technology. Also, I would like to show some key results for the equipment and operating cost for the technology. And finally, the last slide, I will present the production cost, both for the biocrude and the minimum fuel selling price that we have calculated as part of the techno-economic analysis. So starting from the process design, so this is a simple representation of the technology pathway we have been analyzing. So here we have considered sewage sludge from urban wastewater plants as a feedstock. Then we have decentralized production of biocrude at the HTL plant. Here, so there are some main outputs from this HTL plant. Basically, we have solid residues, emissions to water, and air emissions. And then the biocrude produced from the HTL plant is taken to a refinery, and based on refinery processes are upgraded to road fuels. In this case, the road fuels we are considering are gasoline and diesel. There have been some main targets in the project for this technology pathway related with the energy consumption, recovery of phosphorus, and separation of nitrogen. Also for the minimum fuel selling price. All the objectives, all these targets have been quite ambitious. And also is being considered in the project to evaluate the overall economy of this technology as a function of the scale. In this case, the scale is defined as the capacity of the HTL plant, capacity in terms of how much sewage sludge is coming into this HTL plant, which is between 30 and 300 dry tons per day. In the techno-economic analysis that we have been doing, we have been contemplating 5 different scenarios or 5 different process design for the HTL plant, which each of these scenarios contemplate different ways of recovering phosphorus and separate nitrogen from the feedstock. This work has been quite extensive, and there is no time in this presentation to show all the results. So basically, I will just concentrate on one process design for the HTL plant, which is what we call the baseline process design. So the baseline process design for the HTL plant is here defined as the simplest design where we can achieve full conversion of the sewage sludge to the biocrude. So this simplified process block diagram shows the main systems integrating this HTL plant. Basically, we have the sewage sludge is coming into the plant, and then first is preheated and is mixed with the catalyst and the base in a slurry preparation tank. And then from the slurry preparation tank is pressurized and heated to supercritical water conditions, and then taken to the HTL reactors. And then from the HTL reactor, we have the conversion of the feedstock to 4 different phases. We have the main phase, of course, is the old phase, which is the biocrude. And then we have an aqueous phase, a solid phase, and a gas phase. So this four phases are separated in a system, in a phase separation system. And then from this phase separation, we have the biocrude, which is the main product of the HTL plant. We have a solid phase. In this case, the solid phase from the HTL process actually has a quite high concentration of phosphorus. It's around 95% of the phosphorus ends up in the solid phase. And also, the concentration of heavy metals in the solid phase is quite low. So that means that this solid phase can be actually used as a fertilizer for land application, which is quite attractive, quite important for evaluating the economy and also the environmental impact. Another main phase from phase separation is the aqueous phase. So the aqueous phase contains some high concentration of organics, but also high concentration of ammonia. And then after the phase separation, the aqueous phase is going through aerostripping to separate the ammonia. Also, in the aerostripping, there is a flushing of light organic components that are condensed and then mixed together with the oil phase. And then after the stripping and flushing, so the aqueous phase is taken to a water treatment system, which is based on mechanical vapor recompression. So, and then from the mechanical vapor recompression, we have a concentrate, which is taken back to the HTL process. There is only a percentage of this concentrate that is disposed as a bleed. And then this concentrate bleed, it has some high concentration or relatively high concentration of heavy metals. And then in principle, it should be disposed as a solid residue. And then the remaining treated water is just cooled down and can be taken as a water emission. Another phase from the phase separation is the gas phase. In this case, the gas phase contains some chemical energy that is utilized for producing heat that can be used back into the process. And then the flue gas after combustion has to be cleaned for reduction of NOx and also reduction of some acid gases. And then finally, we have the flue gas emitted to air. So in the process design that we have been analyzing and we have been developing in NextGenRoadFuels, we have described the process design very much in details. So I will show an example, for example, of the phase separation system. So in the phase separation system is based on a two-stage. Well, it's based on first gas separator. There is a decompression of the product from HTL. The decompression is based on capillary system. Then we have separation of the gas first, and then after the gas separation, we have the aqueous phase together with the solids and the oil. And there is two-stage centrifuge system. After the first centrifuge, there is basically separation of around 50% of the aqueous phase. And then from this first centrifuge, we have what is called oil sand, which is an emulsion, quite a stable emulsion of the aqueous phase together with the oil and the solids. And then to be able to separate the oil, solids, and aqueous phase from this emulsion, so we have to use some, to mix the oil sand at low pH with a chemical solvent. And then take into a second centrifuge where we can successfully separate the three main phases. Yeah. So then this shows the level of detail we have considered in the process design. And this is really important to be able to do proper scale up of the technology, and particularly for estimating realistically the equipment cost as a function of the capacity of the HTL plant. So we have been working at this level of detail in the entire process design. Some highlights on the upgrading of the biocrude, the process design for the upgrading of the biocrude. Here, the upgrading of the biocrude is based on refinery process, as I have said before. First, there is a separation of the inorganics from the biocrude through a gas reactor, which is also catalytic using hydrogen. After the gas reactor, we have the main catalytic hydrotreating process, where we separate most of the sulfur, the oxygen, and the nitrogen from the biocrude. And then after the hydrotreating, we have a separation of the water phase, the gas phase, and finally, after separation, we have organic liquid that can be fractionated. And the fractionation, basically, we have three main products. One is the middle and heavy naphtha that is used for production of gasoline. We have a middle distillate that is used for producing diesel. And then we have a heavy fraction that is taken to a hydrocracker to be able to convert it to naphtha and middle distillate. And then the product from the hydrocracking is taken back after hydrotreating for separation. So these are some key results for the main mass and energy balances that we have obtained for this process design we have been analyzing. These results are shown in terms of per dry ton of sweet sludge that comes into the process, but also in terms of per gigajoule sweet sludge coming into the process. So we can see that the naphtha and middle distillate that we can produce is around 18.6% in terms of dry mass. And in terms of energy, so the production of naphtha and middle distillate is around 60%. On the biocrude, mass yield is around 29% on dry mass, and is around 73% on energy basis. So I don't have to go very much into the details of the different streams here, but I would like to emphasize here, or to remark that in the HTL plant we use natural gas, and the natural gas used in the HTL plant is to cover the total heat demand that cannot be covered with the heat recovery from the gas of the HTL process. On the cost, so these are some results, or main results for the installed equipment cost. When we look at the biocrude production of the HTL plant, what we see as in the capacity range we have considered between 30 and 300 dry tons per day sweet sludge. So the installed equipment cost is in the range of 0.44 to 0.23 million euros per dry ton sludge per day. And then on the biocrude upgrading, we obtain installed equipment costs in the range of 0.13 to 0.08 million euros per ton biocrude per day. In the figures that you can see below, you see the distribution of the installed equipment costs among the main systems considered in the process design. For the HTL plant, the system that has the highest installed equipment cost is the slurry preparation and HTL, followed by the water treatment. And then on the biocrude upgrading, so is the hydrotreating and hydrocracking that contribute the most to the installed equipment cost. On the operating and maintenance cost, this is for the HTL plant for the biocrude production. So we obtain total operating and maintenance cost in the range of 0.23 to 0.17 kilo euros per dry ton sludge. Here, the figures or the diagrams, you can see the distribution of the different items that contribute to the operating and maintenance cost. And then here you can see that consumables and utilities represent around 25%. Focusing on the consumables and utilities, the main contributor here is the electricity consumption, basically by the, or mainly by the water treatment. And then which represent around 50% approximately of the total cost for consumables and utilities. And also natural gas is another major contributor to the cost associated with consumables and utilities. On the biocrude upgrading, so we have total operating and maintenance costs in the range of 0.27 to 0.20 thousand euros per ton. This excludes the biocrude cost. If we include the biocrude cost, so the total operating and maintenance cost increases quite much. And then the diagrams below shows again the main distribution or the distribution of the contribution from the main items. And then here on the upgrading is actually consumables and utilities that contribute the most, is around 60%. And then among the consumables and utilities is the makeup hydrogen required for the different catalytic processes. That contributes around 85%. And finally, if we consider all the total equipment cost, and also we consider the total operating and maintenance cost, and considering certain financial assumptions, so we are able to calculate both the cost of biocrude production from the HTL plant and also the minimum fuel selling price for the gasoline and diesel fuels produced from the refinery. Here you can see that on the biocrude, the cost of the biocrude that we have obtained is in the range of 1.4 to 0.4 euros per liter in the capacity range that I have mentioned before. And then the minimum fuel selling price that we can achieve is around is in the range of 2.3 to around 0.9. And then this is if we consider the use of existing infrastructure at refinery, but if we are considering a standalone upgrading plan, so actually the minimum fuel selling price is increasing, but not that much. It's increasing by 6% compared to the values of that we have obtained by assuming that we can use existing infrastructure at refinery. Yeah, so this is what I have planned to present today. So if you have any questions, I will be glad to answer.
Thank you, Gonzalo. We're actually running quite a bit behind, so I'll just open the floor for questions. If there's any online questions, I welcome Gonzalo to answer. You can write the answers to them. Is that okay? If you see any in the chat function. Okay, thank you. That was really interesting. Now we're going to go on to Alec, another one of our partners that's come over from Canada. So I'll just hand over the microphone and get the slides set up.
So while she's getting the slides up, I'll just give myself a brief introduction here. I'm Alec Grennan. I'm from Steeper Energy. Today, I'll be talking to you about the financial model that I built as a part of this NextGenRoadFuels project. Okay, so moving on to the next slide when the slides are up there. What I did is I actually created two scenarios, and this is very much an extension of what Gonzalo has already done. So I've just taken his OPEX cost and his CAPEX costs and applied it to this scenario. Perfect, thanks. This is the one. So I've created two scenarios, one in which it's the HDL biocrude scenario, where we take the feedstock and we convert it all the way to biocrude and then sell that biocrude to a refinery. That's the first scenario. And then the second scenario is the same as the first scenario, except we take that biocrude and then upgrade it to finished fuels and then sell that to the market. So I've just, like I mentioned, the OPEX and CAPEX costs come from the work that Gonzalo has done. Whereas what I've done is I've actually put in the finished fuel sale price, the biocrude sale price, the income tax rate, the discount rate, and the size of these plants. And then there's other factors that also came from work package 5, which is to be like the operational uptime, the economic life of the plants, and the commissioning. Sorry, the construction and commissioning time of the plants, which is 2 years to construct them and 1 year to commission them. And I calculated the finished fuel sale price based on the HVO price for the Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and Antwerp market. And HVO actually qualifies for all the same incentives that these HDL biocrude derived finished fuels would apply for. So that's what I did with the finished fuel price. Now I calculated the biocrude price from that finished fuel price by taking a percentage of the existing refineries' costs and profits from that HDL finished fuel price. So just give you an example, because I know that's a little tough to understand. What I did is if a refinery bought a crude oil for $75 and then sold that same crude oil as a diesel at, let's say a diesel at $100, they have a 25% margin. I've just applied that to biofuels here and scaled it up. So instead of the $100, it's approximately $300 we're selling it for per barrel, and they would get a $75 per barrel margin. So it's still the same margin that they're achieving within the petroleum space. So they still get a piece of those incentives. So jumping over to the results here. So this is the HDL biocrude scenario, and the results are down here. So the pre-tax unlevered IRR of this scenario was 17.3%, and I did this based on a capacity of 25,000 dry tons of sewage sludge per year, and I did it on that model because that represents essentially the smallest economically viable plant. So I just wanted to show that to start off with, and that's about 36 million euros. Sorry, yeah, million euros in NPV, using a 10% discount rate. Some of the revenues here, it's just the revenues really are just the selling of the actual biocrude itself, and then the feedstock tipping fees as a result of taking sewage sludge. We don't have any revenues associated with selling the minerals in the ash. That's just assumed to be no cost or profit in this model. So the HTL biocrude scenario actually had the better IRR at the 17%. Whereas the finished fuel scenario right here has about an IRR of 14.5%. And then if you add leverage to it, and then you add also the income tax, you get the equity IRR I have here. And that brings it up to about 20.4% in this case. And I suppose in this case, it would be the 28.5%. So I just wanted to show as well, because that was the minimum viable product, essentially. I just want to show as well how the size of these plants can affect the returns of these plants. So with co-processing, maybe some food waste with sewage sludge, I've made a plant here that is 8 times the capacity of the 25,000 dry ton a year plant. So this is 200,000 dry ton a year plant. And this takes the IRR from, this is the HDL case as well. So this takes the IRR from 17% to 28.2%. And again, the unlevered pre-tax IRR. So there's quite a bit of economic incentive for a plant of this size. So jumping over to the sensitivity analysis I did here. So the sensitivity analysis for the finished fuel case and the HTL biocrude case are actually the same, except in the HTL case here, capital cost is actually the most sensitive of the individual inputs, whereas in the case of the finished fuels, it's actually the selling price of the fuel. So, and this applies as well to the finished fuels. Operating cost is third most sensitive, feedstock revenue is fourth, and then the tax rate is the fifth most sensitive. And again, fuel sales is the most sensitive in this one, whereas capital cost was in the previous HTL case. And in this one as well, there's gas sales from the upgrading of the actual biocrude itself, and that's the least sensitive in the finished fuel case. Jumping over quickly to my plant economic rollout. So what I did here is I just wanted to show the economic benefit potential of a rollout of these plants. So I started building the plants in 2026 and I stopped in 2050. That's a total of 134 plants over those approximately 27 years. And that gives us an economic impact of 1.2 billion euros when you discount that back at 10%. And all the other assumptions are the same as in the individual plant model. So just some insights and recommendations, and this is the last slide of mine. So those returns are quite good. So hopefully that should encourage some investment in the space. But something that really needs to be highlighted is those biofuels incentives are critical because, you know, it was pointed out earlier by Felipe, they're not at cost parity with petroleum products at the moment. So we do need those incentives, and they need to get the better the returns are and the more projects like this that can actually go forward. And just because there also is such a risk to this project at commercializing at that scale at the moment, risk mitigation strategies should be pursued on particularly some of the first projects. And what you can do is just use the sensitivity analysis I've created and then to reduce the risk that way, for instance, by using a long-term fuel offtake agreement. So you have a fixed price and then you don't have to deal with some of that variation in the spot market for selling the fuel. And with that, I will conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Alec. Open the floor to questions. Any questions online? No, they're saving them all for the networking session. Thank you so much, Alec. Okay, so I'd like to welcome our last presenter today, Enrique, before we go over to the panel discussion.
Here? Yeah. Okay, so all right. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. So my name is Enrique Medina Martos. I work at TENER, and I'll be presenting the work that we performed in task T 5.4 of work package 5. Which purpose was to evaluate the environmental performance of the complete value chain proposed by the NextGenRoadFuels project, which actually comprises the decentralized production of biocrude via HCl of sewage sludge, centralized upgrading of biocrude into drop-in fuels, and finally land application of the HCl solid. The specific objectives we addressed were the selection of the case studies that we analyzed. We compiled a comprehensive life cycle inventory from previous deliverables. We identified lacking technical data to be completed from literature sources. We performed the life cycle modeling of the value chain stages, which were out of the scope of the technical work in the project. And finally, we performed the life cycle impact assessment of the selected cases and identified hotspots and also possible improvements. So I'll be just going through this couple of slides very quickly for Gonzalo already presented them. Just keep in mind that the decentralized production of biocrude basically comprised a stage aiming at preparing and pumping the slurry. Then we had the conversion of the sewage sludge via the HCl phase. Then we have also the separation stage. We also have a couple of stages aiming at treating the HCl gas and the aqueous phase. And yeah, we considered the utilization of a commercial heating oil for the integration of the in the thermal recovery in the plant. And we utilized natural gas as the backup heating source. Then the centralized upgrading plant comprises 3 reactors: a guard reactor, a catalytic hydrotreating reactor, then a hydrocracking reactor, and we also have a stage aiming at the recovery of hydrogen, and finally the distillation of the upgraded biocrude into naphtha and diesel. So we performed the study by comparing 2 cases, differing the selected option for the utilization of the HCl solid. The first one considered the direct application on land, and the second one considered the production of estruvite from that solid and final application. The gray boxes here represent the avoided impacts that we consider within the scope for this study. So as you know, most of these processes in LCA terms can be approached both from a field production or as a sludge management perspective. We did both in this work, but here I'm just presenting the results for the field production approach, and from in which we selected as functional unit the production of 1 megajoule of final fuel. And we also applied or considered environmental benefits from the substitution of sludge incineration and the production of mineral fertilizers and their application. Other relevant considerations were the allocation between the 2 products, which was made based on their mass yield and LHV. And we selected the geographical scope to be in Denmark. And we also considered the sewage sludge and to don't carry any environmental burdens when entering the process. And also we excluded the burdens from the construction of infrastructures. So regarding the life cycle inventory, just very quickly, we basically utilized the data that from deliverables 5.3 and 5.4 developed by Gonzalo. And most background processes were taken from the EcoInvent database. And most importantly, as well, emissions from land application of the HCl solid and estruvite and the avoidance of mineral fertilizers were based on the percent plant uptake as reported by that reference that I put there. So yeah, finally, with regards to the impact assessment, we utilized the software CIMA Pro 9.3 and the ILCD method. And the considered impact categories were the climate change, the cumulative energy demand, as they were stated in the project's proposal, but we also included the mineral, fossil, and renewable resources depletion category, for we wanted also to evaluate how both cases performed in terms of nutrient recovery, focusing on phosphorus recovery, right? Finally, we also performed some sensitivity analysis to in order to gain some insight on the environmental hotspots, and also to evaluate how the methodological assumptions that we made may impact the process. So here are the results for cases 1 and 2. The first thing that we can see is that in all the 3 impact categories, the case 1 performed better. Focusing on the climate change category, we can see that the performance is actually really good. That we considered we reached 123% reduction in case 1 if we compared against the fossil fuel competitor of RED 2. And in general, the most impactful categories were seen as the as direct emissions from biocrude, the consumption of electricity, the consumption of hydrogen, and also of natural gas, the delivery at plant and production. On the other side, negative contributions from environmental benefits came from the avoidance of incineration and the production and application of the mineral fertilizer. And yeah, I must say that direct emissions here actually come from the combustion at plant of natural gas. So yeah, another thing that I wanted to comment is because it's been one of the focuses on the study, is related to the difference in the avoidance of mineral fertilizer, phosphorus mineral fertilizer in cases 1 and 2. We observed that actually we obtain more environmental credits in the case of in case 1 as compared to case 2, and this ultimately comes from the fact that despite Estrovite kind of replace more fertilizer than the raw HCl solid, the yield of Estrovite per kilogram produced biocrude is much less than that of the HCl solid, and this ultimately results in case 1 avoiding more mineral fertilizer than the as compared to case 2, right? And these charts represent how sensitive the studied categories are with respect to the inputs that we found to be the most impactful. So what we can appreciate is that all selected parameters show symmetric responses, meaning that the reduction and the increase in the same amount have the a linear response. The climate change category is for sure the more sensitive one. It has the most difference as compared to the other ones. And yeah, and actually the mineral and fossil and renewable resources depletion shows very little variation. So we also analyzed how the selection of a different electricity mix would impact on the process, and we saw that this actually impacts a lot on the climate change and community and cumulative energy demand categories. We assumed, for example, as a case of as a worst case of electricity mix, the mix from the Netherlands, and we saw that the assumption of that mix increased both the climate change by approximately 10 grams of CO2 per megajoule produced fuel, and about, sorry, that's a mistake, about 0.17 megajoules per megajoule produced fuel. On the other hand, well, actually, this is not that bad, because in the end, we observe that even in the case of assuming a worse electricity mix, the percent reduction against the fossil fuel competitor is still over 100% compared to the RED II competitor. And on the other hand, assuming 100% renewable electricity implies reducing the emissions by approximately 13 grams of CO2 per megajoule. Okay, so another a different case that we analyzed was, okay, I'm finishing. Another case that we analyzed was the comparison against different substituted sewage sludge treatment. And here the most important thing is that if we assumed anaerobic digestion instead of incineration, which was the base case, we obtain less environmental credits for anaerobic digestion. Is quite a solid technology. So maybe this could also be another driver to plant location, together with those already commented in previous presentations. So yeah, this is finally another case that in which we assumed the reduction of the electricity load at the aqueous phase treatment facility, and also the reduction of the natural gas demand. And just to sum up, this basically translated into we attaining almost minus 40 to minus 50 grams of CO2 per megajoule, right? So just as concluding remarks, we have that the consumption of electricity, hydrogen, and natural gas were identified as the most relevant inputs. That direct application of the HCl solid can avoid more mineral fertilizer than the application of estruvite. The considered sewage sludge management option being shifted could be a potential driver also to for plant location. That greenhouse gas avoidance of more than 100% can be achieved, even when assuming an electricity mix with a considerable fossil-based contribution. Finally, the figures I just mentioned that are reasonable for us, and the production of drop-in fuels has been proven as an environmentally sound option, aiming at greenhouse gas avoidance and sewage sludge management. And that's everything from my side.
Thank you, Enrique. It's good to hear. Good to hear the positive environmental effects in this case. Thank you. Any questions from the floor or online? Okay, thank you very much. So that's over. We're finished with the presentations. We are running behind, but I think it's really valuable to have a small discussion, even if we can have it a little bit reduced, or maybe it can replace the networking. It's fine. So if I'd just like to welcome the panel to the floor. We've got some questions that Thomas is going to ask, and then but I welcome online questions as well to be written in the chat box, and we'll be reading them out as it goes.
Okay. I think to stand is okay. It's fine.
Okay.
We'll pass the microphone.
I'm going to put the questions on the screen for you. You can start with.
All right, good. So I think let's open the floor for questions. I will open up the first question. I'm very curious about let's say the price link or the cost of these renewable fuels. We heard a little bit about the cost today, and I think we've seen the cost of fossil fuels going up and down also during the course of this project, also during the previous project we have had, but that the interest in the renewables and HTL in particular is just going up. So the question is, how directly linked is renewables to the price of fossil fuels? Who would like to open up that question?
I can take this one. Hello, everybody. Maybe a small introduction from my side. My name is Johannes Schuurman. I've been working on this project in 2019, early 2020 with some people and some familiar faces here indeed. Over the years, I moved more towards the running business of good fuels, meaning that I'm working on a daily basis on biofuel prices, fossil prices, the incentive gap, and make sure we actually supply these fuels to the shipping sector at least. So for aviation or road, I cannot tell you much. But at least for shipping, if you look at biofuels that are used in shipping nowadays, are mainly based on fats and oils, bio oils, of course. And the price of biodiesel today is around $22,250 per cubic meter. So that means that if you look at your results, that you're actually quite close, or even can be cheaper, dependent on the scale of your plant. So I think that's good news. Assuming, of course, the same energy density as biodiesel, but I guess it's even higher if you upgrade it. So that's actually good news. If you look at marine gas oil nowadays, it's doing $1,050 per ton, meaning that's around $20 per gigajoule. If you compare that again with your prices, of course, it's lower, but it's coming closer already. 2 years ago, when I worked on this project, fossil fuel prices were half of the price. Biodiesel was doing around $1,200 per cube. So in 2 years, a lot can change. And I think if you look at your product right now, you are very close to competitive. And I definitely see that's the reason why, big companies should have a big interest in this technology.
Thanks very much. That's good news for the project. Anybody else who want to add in on this? Okay, I think that there were some questions on. I think we should try to prioritize if there's somebody external. Oh. Can we see it? Is that? Okay, that's more on the technology implementation challenges. Okay, that's a little bit aligned to one of my questions as well. So that is also on the commercialization of HTL. Of course, we have technical challenges, but what are the main technical challenges holding back HTL from deployment? Maybe I can direct that question to Steen. In your opinion.
For HTL in general, and I can say that we are in the later phases in demonstration on lignocellulosic in Norway. And then originally our intent of this was to fast track same scale at Norway to get to the market faster and for this gate fee materials. And that has, also we still have challenges to overcome before we have a commercial ready technology for waste materials. So has been mentioned that we have there's different there's particularly fouling issues during heat up that prevent us from commercializing this technology today. You can say we still missing removing all the nitrogen. The nitrogen removal during upgrading is also an extra issue that needs to be solved.
So my name is Jostein. If you don't know me, I work for Topsoe. I haven't been part of the project, but I've been working on upgrading of renewable fuels for the last 13 years, more or less, and I work in Topsoe's R&D. And so let's say HCl works, which it will at one point. What I think is the main missing part is actually removing the inorganics that you have in the oil. And I'm not talking about sulfur, oxygen, nitrogen, because that can be done catalytically. Of course, you probably need some more expensive processes than what you have now, but it should be done. But the inorganics, or the contaminants such as alkali metals, phosphorus, as you talked about, and then hearing 3 to 5 years of catalyst lifetime, I'm saying you need 0. So if you compare that to, we have a lot of experience in renewable diesel, and you need single digits of those altogether. I mean, to talk about years in catalyst lifetime. I mean, even just to talk about years, you need single digits. So I think that to have a commercial solution for removing them, that's very important to be able to make this fly. Of course, if you do co-processing, you dilute a bit, but still you need low. I think that's a major part that needs to be addressed.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Now, maybe on the commercialization, I could ask you, Lasse, what is the role of academia? Technology.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Great question. Well, I think the role of commercialization, of course, academia needs to collaborate, as we do here in a consortium, with people who can commercialize and implement. But I think the role of academia has changed over the years. I think it's really important that we also realize that things have to roll quite fast. And so we also engage in the short-term stuff. That means, of course, also that we cannot neglect looking further ahead. We need to always be 1 or 2 steps ahead, but we have to be able to engage on issues like what Jostein is saying, what Steen is saying, that these are critical. Otherwise, we'll not be able to contribute to commercialization.
Mm-hmm. I just noticed the question here on on the commercialization. You need refineries, or you need to sell your product and all this. And when we do HCl upgrading, we're not just producing one specific fuel, like it's naphtha, it's jet fuel, it's diesel, and it's marine fuels and so on. Where do you think that we see the first rollout of products? Is it in the marine sector, or there's a strong push for aviation fuels and so on? Maybe I can ask you, Johannes, on the marine. Do you think that's the first place that we see a rollout?
That's of course dependent on the quality of the product. So if the quality meets the requirements of marine, but also meets the requirements of aviation, like if you have different fractions, of course, then it will be both. There's not one sector that, in my opinion, has a preference. You see that the public opinion is more focused into aviation. You see the first countries having a mandate for aviation, while for shipping, currently only the Netherlands is the country with the only incentive, and they are scaling it down actually, because they hope Europe will take over, and in the end IMO as well. But in my opinion, there is not a preference between aviation and marine, to be honest.
Okay, interesting.
And I'm Daniele Bianchi. I work for ENI in the energy from biomass area. In my opinion, just a point. In my opinion, also the specification of the final product is very important, because maybe it's simpler to obtain a marine fuel which has a less strong specification than aviation fuel. So probably not all the fraction produced from biocrude will be suitable for the direct blending. This could be a problem, I think, an issue.
Yeah, maybe to give a small comment on that. Indeed, the fractions, if you look at the current products that we offer already, we also look at SAF residues already. So we are already using those in the shipping sector, because not all of the SAF is used in aviation because it doesn't meet the spec. So it's definitely a collaboration between the two sectors.
SAF residue, that sounds...
It exists, yeah.
Really? Okay, so it says HTL is an energy intensive process. Can you give us an idea about the net energy, I guess, use process? Is it's a little bit specific based on maybe biocrude produced? I think the obvious one is maybe steam. So look at this question here. Yeah, it could be energy efficiency as well. So do you think HTL is an energy intensive process?
I think HCl in itself should be the most energy efficient process and having the highest carbon yield of any technology due to low processes, direct conversion into liquid. I think that's well documented. I think we are in this project around the crude oil around 70 to 80% energy efficiency.
So could you comment on
and how much are we overall 10% lower or something like that?
Yeah, so if you were to produce, let's say, 1 gigajoule of fuel, how much external energy would you need for that? If you exclude the biomass.
Around 15 to 20%.
Okay. Yeah, I was just, did this raise any questions from the floor?
Just a question regarding certification. We spoke about sustainable aviation fuel. The way through HCl is not yet certified. Is there any centralized action for the certification? Or, I mean, I think that could also speed up the penetration of the market.
Yeah, so again, we are not in aviation, but what I know about aviation is that any company that has a new technology can start the CORSIA procedure to just get the fuel certified. So it is possible for aviation. For shipping, there's currently still no standard for biofuels. They are working on a biodiesel standard, which is close to the road quality biodiesel, but in shipping, they are definitely far behind. On the other hand, ships only look at the warranty of their engines, and typically after 5 to 10 years, the warranty is gone, and they're willing to use whatever they can, which we do nowadays. So yeah, there's some more flexibility in shipping.
In aviation, there is a lot going on for sustainable aviation fuels. So there are lots of activities on setting up pre-screening activities. There is a fast track, so you can get your, I mean, if it's sort of hydrocarbon-like, you can blend up to 10% if you get it certified. So I think there is an awareness in the community that this has to be more efficient. But of course, aviation fuel certification procedures were not set up to accommodate biofuels. They were set up to make sure that we didn't introduce something into the mix that was, would end up having detrimental effects. So I think there is an enormous awareness that it has to really be accelerated, and both in the US and Europe, there are lots of activities to that end. Exactly where it lands, I don't know, maybe Daniele or someone from the refinery. Oh, no, we don't know. We think it's going to get better.
I think there was another question from the floor. Was it?
Just I have a question for ENI regarding the final product that we have from our project is a mixture of naphtha, gasoline, and some marine fuels. Yeah. Do you believe, Daniela, that this should be distilled in the refinery or in a standalone unit? Because we need a distillation at the end of the day. We don't have pure, let's say, products from our process.
Yes, it depends on the way you produce the upgraded mixture, the upgraded mix. If you, and this could be the best option, if you success in co-feeding of the crude oil, or maybe stabilize the crude oil, biocrude into the refinery. This is automatically separated in the existing facility. If you build a dedicated upgrading process, that from the economical point of view maybe is not the best situation due to the cost, capex you have to add to the global economical balance. In this case, if your products after the upgrading are under the specification required, you can directly co-feed, not in one of the upgrading process, but just the distillation to the separation.
Okay. So you believe that the co-feeding is for the refineries the best option?
The best is to co-feed for the upgrading stage.
Yeah.
The simplest case is just to have a separate upgrading, and then if the specification of all the different fraction are in line with the required specification, you can separate it in an existing distillation section in the refinery.
Okay. For the steeper point of view, for the demo plant that you are building in Norway, do you think also to make also a distillation at the end in order to separate the fractions?
Say the demonstration plant is not large enough to be viable in itself for lignocellulosics. The expensive fuels, the wood waste are expensive fuel. But I think whether you do standalone or you do a refinery, I think you will always need an extra step as an entry to the refinery to make it compatible with the rest. And for Danielle, as I say, what are your? That's one question to you, if I can. So what are your concerns about introducing it in feedstock like this into to your refineries?
We try. ENI is working started to work years ago on trying to develop an HTR process focused on the sorted domestic organic waste transformation, and we have main issue. One of them is to convince refinery people to accept this product, since they are very, very concerned about the level of the catalyst, also the inorganic content. The main concern is the inorganic content, and so it's very difficult. We couldn't yet convince refinery people to use our product.
Okay, very good. I think
one more comment on the introduction to refinery. The HCl oils are special in the relation that it has 10% oxygen or something like that, and removing the oxygen itself gives you boiling point reduction of say 100 to 150 degrees C. So you're more just removing the oxygen more or less doubles the amount of lower distillate or middle distillates just by the oxygen removal, and makes it more compatible to refinery operations.
all right. I think I'll move on to the next question. I think I'll direct that to you, Jostein. So at Topsoe, you're working with many technology providers also in the renewable fields. So, speaking of refiners to deploy these renewable technologies, is there any way around the refineries, or is it going to be deployed with these, regardless of how we look at it right now?
I think refineries will do it. I mean, in Europe, and I mean, so often they don't want to put this into their big units, right? I mean, co-processing in a big unit, you ruin everything if it goes wrong. They're afraid because that's their thing. Maybe if they're lucky, they'll have some smaller units that they're not using anymore, so they can revamp. I mean, that are possibilities you can do in refineries. You can revamp a smaller unit if you had something that you don't use anymore. Use that to do, well, the upgrading part, so you have it well enough to put it in. And then you can have it, because then you de-risk a bit actually introducing it to a refinery. Of course, that means that you have the existing equipment and your cost is also lower. So, but there is really a pull from refineries to introduce advanced biofuels. It's a big pull.
So what would it take to convince them?
to have something working, basically. If someone comes with this and say this works, we can show that this runs. If you buy this technology, or if you can sell us this product continuously, they would do it. Of course, we or other technology providers would also come in and have to say, well, we can design or help you design this unit so it will run. So it's two parts. But now, what I see is actually that they really want and try to introduce it, but the problem is, where can they buy it? I think that's one of the problems. And then, of course, you have fast pyrolysis oil. Well, that's actually being sold commercially, right? But that's harder to hydroprocess, depending, of course, on feedstock. And I mean, there are many issues, but just, I mean, to be like rough division. I mean, fast pyrolysis is further into commercial than HTL, but it's harder to put into a hydroprocessing refinery if it's not an FCC. Yeah, those are two different. So there's definitely a pull, but it's, well, we need some finished products.
So let's assume that it works. I've been wondering from academia point of view, we try to push, like, let's say it's the blending, the combustion test. We want to push the numbers, or if it's co-processing, we want to push the numbers, the blending percent. Is there some kind of, magical number or a psychological number you want to reach? Is it 2%, 5%, or what is convincing? What's going on out there right now?
Look, you need a certain percentage because you have to use the carbon-14 measurement. I mean, just to get the tax stuff, right? Carbon-14, that's like 3% uncertainty. So if you put 2% in, you can't really measure it.
Okay. Yeah.
And then you can't get the tax. You can't get the economics running. You might as well not. So that's actually an issue. So you need to put enough in so that the measurement you have actually can measure in the product what you have there. So that's one thing. So you need 5, 10. If you have less than 3, I don't think you can measure it well.
Okay. What about you, Johannes, from a blending perspective? What do you see? Is there a driver, or was it motivation?
So if you look at 2025 in Europe, they're looking at 0.5% each blend mandate for the fleet coming into ports in Europe. You can bunker one ship probably and allocate that fuel to your fleet so that you don't need to put in 0.5% in every vessel. So that's one angle. So that's very low, probably not going to happen from an operational perspective, doesn't make sense. If you look at IMO regulations right now, last summer, they allowed the use of 30% biofuel in fossil fuels. So you don't have to go to the whole regulatory loophole where you need to get all kinds of exemptions. So we see B30 becoming big right now. So a lot of big companies are testing B30 because they see once this regulation jumps in, we want to use B30s because that's easy to use. There's a significant amount of biofuel in there, so it's cheap from an operational perspective. So I won't see it happening that we're only going to blend into 5 to 7, 10%. It's definitely going to be around the 30-ish when we start in single vessels. But it can be a mix of biofuels. It doesn't have to be one single biofuel.
That's interesting. I think I'm just going to grab one of the questions from online. It says, compared to anaerobic digestion, what is the advantage of HTL treatment of sludge? Daniele?
I can try to answer, just giving an example of the Italian situation where this question has a very clear answer. In Italy, there is just in Italy, there is an additional issue in addition to convince refinery people to use bio-oil. Is that in Italy, Italy approved 4 years ago a national directive, it's called biomethane directive, which push a lot biomethane as a transportation fuel, introducing strong, very important incentives. There are 3 kinds of incentives, one on energy basis. It is huge. It is more or less $850 per tons of biomethane injecting in the grid, natural gas grid. So it's a very, very big there is an additional incentive for building converting biogas plant into biomethane, an additional incentive to directly sell in a gas station of the biomethane. So, and also an additional that 75% of the advanced biofuel, which are required by the RIDE directive, in Italy must be in form of biomethane. So in Italy, this answer is clear. The competition, since
there is no competition.
There is no competition. In Italy, it's very, very difficult to implement HTL if you want to use sewage sludges or organic food waste, which are in competition with this technology. So it depends on the policy. In Italy, no way.
You have a comment.
So most sewage wastewater treatment plant has anaerobic digestion, and what it does is to reduce the volume to circa half, but you still have sewage sludge out of an anaerobic digester, so you need to have a home for that. What HCl does for sewage or anaerobic digested sewage, that it could be the feedstock as well, is it's destructing and taking all the way to being more circular with the phosphorus recovery. But the amount of oil you produce from waste and from sewage per unit are small. So it's more more circular or more sustainable waste destruction unit than it's an oil producing unit.
Just want to add on what we compete with anaerobic digestion is because a lot of bio-waste you collect includes garden waste. There's a wood or lignocellulosic part that anaerobic digestion is hard to break the lignins. And also there will be some plastics mixed with all the bio-waste, and it will affect the fertilizer or the soil improver that produce from the anaerobic digestion.
Yeah, and I think in the project we showed quite some substantial destruction of these critical micropollutants. So that's also a key advantage, of course, of HTL. Oh, you have a question? Oh.
Just following on from Daniele's summary of the Italian, what's the word in English? Directive, thank you, position on biofuels and biomethane. From the other countries that you're representing in Europe today, is there anything similar, or is there any country that's really driving for biofuels, or are we looking more towards our governments favouring biomethane? And is there any inside knowledge from the other European countries that we have here?
In Denmark, there is also a state subsidy on biogas, and I think that given the current situation in Europe, biomethane is an attractive product. I think so. I don't know, but so biogas is also favored in Denmark.
So maybe the next question is more for, who's pushing for this? Now we have HTL technology providers here and E&I, sorry? And E&I, you're also working on HTL. So in the current HTL landscape, where do you see the strongest movement? Is it in the technology providers like Steeper Energy, or is it pushed by refineries, or who's pushing forward HTL technology right now?
In E&I experience, we are just in the research phase. Just we build a small pilot, but we are in the research phase. Typically, big oil company, big energy company, if there is a technology available on the market, they prefer is robust technology. typically, Eni would prefer to buy outside than to develop inside, if there is available technology.
All right, so maybe the next question is, Steen, do you think the refineries is your competitor? Or are they their customer?
I think they are competitor, but I think most refiners look for how to decarbonize or how to introduce renewable molecules into their value chain. And if you look at, since we started this project, you can also say who's been filing actives also from our freedom to operate analysis, and you can see most oil companies have some activities, and also it's technology providers like Steeper, and there's more and more since we started the project.
Can you check online as well? Just go.
I have a question for Steen. So we mentioned like decentralized HTL unit because I think it had a better CO2 footprint. Do you see in the future this decentralized solution, or do you think like someone will build like a big HTL unit and gather sludge? What's deeper opinion about that? If you think that the decentralized installation of HTL unit will be favored, or if a centralized unit is more likely to be the solution?
I think it will have for the HTL plant. I think it will be decentralized, but I think a single wastewater treatment plant is too small for, at least for producing crude oil in a petrochemical context, or for upgrading than for marine fuel or some simple stabilization.
Okay, good. Next question here.
Just I have a comment because I'm working with refineries a lot the last years, and I know that refineries today are looking for feedstock. So for them, the biocrude is the key issue for the refineries. As far as they have found biocrude, they are friends with Steeper and the other technology providers. If Steeper produce final product, they start to be enemies. That's my experience. So for my opinion, the best way is to be friends with the refineries. And because they have a lot of technology the last years, and I think be in the biofuels, it's better to provide to them the biocrude. And biocrude which can be acceptable and to co-feed in a refinery process. For my opinion, this is the best option. So Daniela, the question for you is, what is the best technology? Is to use this let's say, dirty biocrudes or heavy biocrudes in a resid fluid catalytic cracking unit, in a resid hydro cracking unit, or in a slurry operation like the slurry you have in Eni?
We evaluated some directly experimental research, some indirectly, all these three options. Basically, the option based on that use hydrogen would be discarded because of the cost of the hydrogen, and also the higher sensitivity of the catalyst typically used in hydro treating. We selected a technology which is called Eni slurry technology, which is a technology devoted to the complete conversion of the very the bottom of the barrels, the very heavy oil, bitumen, feedstock or low value feedstock containing a lot of asphaltene, very complex molecule. And then this technology works on this kind of very dirty, very heavy, very viscous substrate. It can process also the biocrude, but in this case, what is the problem? Biocrude contain oxygen. This kind of heavy oil doesn't contain oxygen. So during the hydrogenation, this is another treating, you produce water. And water in presence of sulfur, which is present in this kind of feedstock, can generate corrosion. So in the case of this technology, we didn't solve the typical catalyst issue, was the corrosion issue. So there is in each there is an issue. At the end, the refining people say, no, it's not suitable for us. This is our experience. Maybe it depends on the specification of the biocrude you provide to the refinery. It should be something like the pure the final product, since they are very require very strong specification. But each one of these technology you mentioned has an issue, and refining people doesn't want to risk to put this.
Okay, seems like we have exhausted the questions from online. Are there more questions in here? We're running a little bit late. Maybe it's time to wrap up. I think maybe I could ask one last question. Maybe it's tricky. It's for you, Les. What do you think is the biggest achievement of this consortium?
Right. How long have we got? Yeah, thank you very much. Good question. I was actually thinking to say something completely different, but let me. No, I think as I tried to say at the very beginning, I think that it's hard to pinpoint something as a single achievement, but I think the fact that we've actually been able to work across the entire value chain and produce coherent data for all the different stages and turn them into overall models. We address economics, we address environmental aspects, and not just solve technical challenges, but also identify new optimization points. I think it's been an achievement. So I know it's a little bit fluffy, but I think that there are lots of achievements in this project that should be acknowledged, and also so very often you see these. It's a very linear value chains. I still like the letters from the beginning that that we actually looked into other effects of what we're doing. So we talk about fuels, we talk about phosphorus, and then there are all these other things that are only now beginning to emerge as something that could potentially contribute to this full or this more comprehensive value proposition. And then really nice teamwork, I think, has been an achievement.
I fully agree. Anything else onto the greatest achievement, or should we just wrap off? But I fully agree. Yeah, it's the whole value chain makes the difference.
I just wanted to say thank you very much, everybody, for everything. I think we should all be very grateful for each other, and a round of applause to say well done for a great project, a 4-year project that's now come to an end. There will be a final publication that will be available online, and a link will be sent around to all the attendees today, online and in person, as well as anyone else that wants to see it. So I think we can hang around for a little bit of time, have another drink of tea or coffee or water, and have a little chat with each other. Is there anything else you want to say to wrap up, Thomas, Lassie?
No, I think it's been a really good project. Really good project. I think that's a comment.